All right, we're live. Welcome everybody. Laken Summerville. What's up? How we doing today?
What's up? I am doing fabulous. Had a good start to my Friday, got a good workout in, and I'm ready to roll into the weekend.
No doubt. Yeah, really grateful to have you on. Really have been excited to have you on because been following the work that you're doing with mindset, with rejuvenating health. You have just a really refined way of looking at this big word of mindset in here. So I'm excited to dive into your journey and have a good conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So how'd this all start for you? I'm always curious with coaches of how they got into this world. So what inspired you first to get in the world of strength, of health, which eventually led you into what you're doing now, which is a lot on the mental performance side of coaching?
Yeah, it's funny. So I can't say that I've ever had a huge health struggle to overcome, right? A lot of people have a story of, either I was at a point in time really overweight and I had my own like weight loss journey, or I had a health scare that I had to overcome. And I can't say that I personally have that. I've always really been into physical activity. I did sports all through school, and I've always been very, very competitive. And I got a little burnt out on that by the time I got into university. So I was going to continue. I was actually an endurance athlete, funny enough, because that's not where I'd love to do, love to spend my time working out now.
Everybody has a
Um,
past.
yes, exactly. I'm like, I used to run miles and miles. Ugh. But I was planning on doing track in college, and I just got to the point where I was really burnt out on it. I didn't enjoy it anymore. And so I wanted to have the real college experience, and I did not do any sports. And promptly, my habits went down the drain with that. And, like what happens when you do that in college and you eat a lot and you drink a lot and you don't work out. And then afterwards, very shortly after I graduated, a good friend of mine was opening a CrossFit gym in the town where I was living. And she invited me to come check it out. She thought I would really like it. At the time, I was doing like a lot of Les Mills stuff, like boot camp
hmm
style things, a lot of kettlebells. And I was hooked from the very first workout. I went in, I think we did Jackie, and I just loved it. I drank the Kool-Aid real hard and got
Why?
into
What was it about?
competing.
What was it about it right off the bat?
Um, for me, it was getting that sense of competition back, I think, that I'd been missing just doing kind of traditional workouts. I enjoyed the type of things that I was doing in other fitness classes, but this was a different dynamic because of the variability, right? So it was always something different. It was ever changing. I wasn't like, I never felt like I was plateauing, and I had to use my mind just as much as I did my body. So
Mhm.
it was this drive of a little bit of the suffering aspect, right? The mental fortitude of being able to suffer well and kind of push yourself to that threshold and hold it there, and testing your mental limits as well as your physical limits. And I was just really, really, it drew me in really
Mm.
good. So I
Was
started
was
training.
that different for you than like early on in track? I mean, that's mentally challenging at the same time. Was it a different feeling or was it more of a resurgence of what you felt before
It
going
was a
forward?
combination. So it was the resurgence of the suffering, right? Of like that threshold training that I really liked, almost getting that like runner's high, combined with the different modalities. So the fact that I was always training a weakness, right? I started to become so much more of a generalist than a specialist because I was always finding something that, okay, well, I need to work on my skills and drills with snatching because I'm terrible at it, or I need to really focus on my gymnastics work, right? Or I need to just be able to do more grunt work. And there was always something to work on. So it just really maintained my interest long
Mhm.
term, which turned into a decade of competing, which also takes a toll, right? And
Yeah.
so I got really, really heavy into the fitness and the competitive side of CrossFit. Simultaneously, I started coaching in the CrossFit space as a side hustle of my corporate job.
Mhm.
And I would always say, like, that's my passion. Like, I would do that for free, but I had my passion and then, like, my bill paying job,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And then it was the gateway drug of health. So I got into that. And then slowly but surely, I realized, well, I can't outwork my terrible diet. And so I should probably dig a little bit more into nutrition.
Mhm.
So I got started studying heavy into nutrition, got a couple certifications, started coaching that piece of it. then started doing more individualized coaching. And then I started to segue into more functional health and holistic health in 2020 during the pandemic, because like most people, that made me pump the brakes a little bit, and I couldn't be in the gym for a period of time.
Hmm.
And I started nursing some inflammation and some old injuries that I wasn't paying attention to while I was competing, because I was able to take that space and get some clarity on that. And that allowed me to really appreciate the idea of focusing more on longevity and
Hmm.
sustainable health versus, okay, well, let me die for reps and, how much can I deadlift today? Because that's what matters, right?
Right, yeah. Was longevity ever a thought process during the time of like competition or so, or was it kind of just completely out of the zone and maybe this is something I'll get to eventually?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was kind of like this. Exactly. It was like, well, I'll worry about that when I need to, kind
Hmm.
of thing, right? Not realizing that we always need to, because it's something that if we can get ahead of the curve, it can only elongate our longevity, right?
Right. Yeah. So what with competition, did you jump into competition right away or was it after you got into it as like, oh, I'm pretty good at this? Did someone coax you into that, like a mentor or a coach, or how did that process come about for you?
Yeah. My friend that was opening the gym that I joined at the time, she was competing locally, like in regional competitions. And I was about 6 months in to starting training, or doing CrossFit at her gym. She was like, you're really good. I think that you would really enjoy this piece of it. If you want to, you should come to the next competition that I'm doing and just watch. And I watched and I was like, yes, I want to do
Mm.
this. So it was like the next level. And so then I signed up for one. I did my first one actually individual. So a lot of people were like, "Oh, you don't want to do like a team or a partner one?" I'm like, "No, like I just want to see what I can do."
Hmm.
And I
How'd you
podiumed
fare?
my first competition.
Wow.
Yeah, I got second, and again like instantly hooked. So that's where I went pretty far down that rabbit hole. I did like the MAC and Wadapalooza and a couple things like that.
Hmm.
And it is, I will say, I don't regret it, but it did take its toll, right? Like a lot of people, I think CrossFit can get a bad rap when they look at just that piece of it.
Hmm.
And I love it as a fitness tool. And I will say it's a different ball game when you're training at that level and, um, putting that much abuse or stress on your body over
Yeah.
time.
I was just talking about this because CrossFit's an interesting idea to me because I haven't been in that world. I was in the hardstyle kettlebell world. I know a lot of friends, a lot of people I've talked to who are in the CrossFit space, and there's there can be a stigma around pretty much anything, but there was
Yeah.
one in CrossFit of the difference of the competition versus what actually CrossFit is from there. In your experience, like is has that stigma changed over time? Have you seen it kind of evolve or kind of what's your take
I
on that?
I can't speak to it now because I haven't really been in that space.
Hmm.
I would say since 2020. But in my experience for the 10 years that I was in it, I could say that there was a big contrast between the classes that I was coaching as a coach in the gym versus the style that I was training as a competitor in the very same gym, right?
Mm.
So the way that I trained was very different than the way that I would coach the general
Mhm.
public coming in order to have a goal of just having general fitness or functional fitness, right? And
Mm.
we were taking more of the big picture into account of like, okay, you're here because you want to be able to get on the floor and play with your kids or carry your groceries and without hurting your back, or all of these ways that it can be practically applied to your life versus you're here to PR, every week and make sure that you can beat out the top 1% of athletes in the world. That's a completely different
Yeah,
ballgame.
yeah. Is it a hard mental shift for you in time of competition from going from like coaching and it's a very different kind of mindset, a different approach versus how you coach yourself? That was something that was interesting to me when I first got into this. I only knew aesthetics and strength and stuff and then worked with a lot of people in quote unquote general health, but they were more functional based goals, wanting to keep doing the things that they did outside the gym. And it was kind of an eye-opening moment for me. Did you have that at all?
I will say sometimes I felt a little hypocritical, right? Because I would have clients who would look up to me as a coach and they would watch me compete, right? And they would say, "Well, I want to be able to do what you do." And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, you
No,
don't.
you don't. I heard.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Like, I'm super inflamed, actually. But I understood the allure of it as well. And so, kind of using that to meet them where they were. And it wasn't very hard for me to switch
Mhm.
mentality. I will say that I often had a coach myself in order to be able to push me to the limits that I would need to go. And it was interesting. I didn't have the language to describe this at the time, but looking back on it now, I can say that the inner voice, the tone of it was very, very different between the the coach hat that I would wear for other clients. And honestly, probably still to this day, it is the same thing. And the way that I coach myself. And the way that I coach myself, and I think most people would resonate with this, is a much more harsh approach,
Right.
right? Versus the way that I coach other people. And being able to see that for them, like seeing the optimism and the possibility for other people, a lot of times that's really hard to do for yourself. And I'm not immune to that.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that we're such a harsher critic for ourselves versus working with other people?
I think that we are almost conditioned that way over lived experiences through time, right? Like when you think about the way that we usually learn as children, a lot of possibility gets stifled and a lot of consequences are what is brought to the forefront, right? So when we're growing up, we start to become when you're little and you're naive, that possibilities are limitless, right? It's like, of course I could do that thing. I don't know any different. And then we get to a point where people start saying, well, if you do that thing, there's going to be this consequence associated with it, or people are going to say this about you, or there's going to be judgment or shame
Mhm.
or penalties, right? And then we start to pay more attention to the negative feedback than we do the
Mhm.
potential possibility and the positivity that could be out there. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that it just gets constantly reinforced over time. And that's what starts to build this inner critic character that
Mhm.
almost grows bigger and bigger as we grow.
It's so interesting. Yeah. So now we're diving into a lot of the mindset piece. So, I mean, now the work that you do with Rejuvenating Health is focused a lot on mindset and mental performance. When did that start to become a focus or really the next passion for you of, going into coaching?
I would say during the pandemic, because that highlighted a lot of inner turmoil for a lot of people that they were processing. And my clients were no different. So a lot of the clients that I was working with and doing nutrition coaching and wellness coaching one-on-one, they were having a whole other set of issues that were recurring while they were working from home and trying to, juggle being teachers for their kids while simultaneously working and never having worked from home before, trying to incorporate healthy habits while their schedule was flipped upside down, right? All of these things started to come up, and relationship dynamics were messy because they had never been around their spouse for that many hours of the day, or like dealing with other family dynamics, right? So all of these things started to come up, and I kept revisiting the idea that I'm becoming a life coach, whether I like it or not, right? Like
Mhm.
these people, the things that we're talking about in our calls is so much deeper than, what were your macros today, or how much protein did you eat? Did you get 3 balanced meals in and enough
Right.
water, right? And that wasn't moving the dial enough anymore. And so I started becoming really fascinated with human psychology and like what was contributing to the decisions that you were making on a day-to-day basis, and how could you start to view your choices a little bit differently. And that led me into more like motivational style coaching. And then I started getting very interested in NLP, neuro linguistics processing, and word choice became very top like of my awareness for a
Mhm.
period of time. And that's when I found Enlifted,
Mhm.
and I was instantly hooked. I was like, this is what I've been looking for, right? Like this is a practical application that I can actually coach people through, and they can understand what I'm saying without having to drink through a fire hose, right? Like we can
Right.
do exercises where they can have these epiphany and aha moments and then incorporate it into their day-to-day life. And
Mhm.
so when I started doing that, I started incorporating it with my clients that I was working with through my personal training studio that I do nutrition and wellness mentorship with. And I started working with my mentor at the time, who is my functional medicine practitioner who runs Rejuvenating Health.
Hmm.
And so slowly over time, when I was coaching nutrition and wellness for her, I very quickly became our resident mindset coach because I was so fascinated by it and quickly grew in that field. And I was able to help these women more and more. And that I started to chip away at this niche, right? Of like these women that had essentially lost their self-identity in the overwhelm of their day to day that seemed like they couldn't achieve the things that they wanted to do and they felt lost in trying to get there. And where I'm at now is working with women to help them really rewrite their story to reclaim their main character energy,
Yeah.
right? So they can get back to that place where they realize, oh, like I don't have to have a permission slip to have self-care. Like this is, and this is an ongoing practice. This isn't a
Hmm.
finish line that we arrive at.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Around that pandemic time, which now, I mean, we're almost 5 years, from that time,
It's
which is freaking
crazy.
crazy, but kind of really similar when I started getting fascinated by psychology of success and mental performance because same thing, we had a studio, people were coming in and it was amazing. We were tripling our space, we were expanding, and then all of a sudden we were shut down for 9 months and we put together a program, people were doing well for a short period of time, but then slowly
Mhm.
started to fall. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, but in calling our clients and asking them, how's your spirits? We haven't seen yet the online classes as much. There was an answer I got numerous times that really threw me where they said, I don't feel like I know what I need to do if you're not there. And there
Yeah.
was this kind of like peculiar thing of like, oh, like as coaches, like strategically and rationally, like and logically, we can put together these plans and programs and just think it's very simple, just follow these simple steps. But as soon as you remove yourself from the equation, you're enabling people at the same time as you're trying to help them subconsciously, and the autonomy is not there at all from it.
Yeah.
And that's
And
where
we
mindset
walk that
comes
talk,
in. Mhm.
right? And then we take for granted that that's just a part of, that's our default pattern.
Yeah.
That's what just happens in our everyday life. And we're like, we don't,
Yeah.
and I remember being in that place where I was like, I don't understand why you can't do this too.
I know.
Right.
Yeah. I know.
And, and
How
it's
was
like, oh,
that?
I have to be a better coach to be able to
Yeah, no
understand
doubt.
that.
How was that process of implementing new structures and new plans? Was it something did you speak with clients of like, oh, we're going to be doing something new, or did you start to kind of slowly kind of intertwine it with, what was the process like for you?
Yeah, I did not like unveil this new method that I was going to be rolling out. Because to be honest, I don't think that I 100% believed in it at first. I needed to provide myself some evidence and like have
Sure.
a proven concept before I was ready to really hone in on it. And I started dabbling in this with clients that I used to work with through the CrossFit gym that I ran. And then I shifted during the pandemic to personal training and opened a personal training studio. And with that, that's where I really started to shift the direction that I was going with it. So we started looking at, okay, if we can identify what are the key habits that are going to move the dial for you, then can we take a step back and look at, okay, what are the choices that contribute to those habits and how can we create some stickiness in the day to try to get them to be the new routine, right? To get some pattern interrupts in there. And during that process, we started to look at, okay, this is the stuff that really matters, right? Like the 2 to 3 hours that you're spending with us on the training floor during the week, and then the plan that we're putting together for you is one piece. But this human connection where we're meeting once a week and we're talking about the choices that we're making on a regular basis and the reason why. And I'm asking you the right questions that can get you to think about your thinking. That is the stuff that's going to actually move the dial because that's what takes care of the other 23
Mhm.
hours of the day outside of the time that you're actually with me in person where we talked about that autonomy, right?
Mhm.
So if you are going to try to outsource that for yourself, then what better way than to evaluate your own choices and to start asking yourself those questions and me to start to help you reprogram that. So that way
Mhm.
it's not always me that you're looking to,
Yeah.
right? You can start asking yourself these questions too.
I love that. So, what I really like about your work, Lake, is I'm always looking for how people can refine like big concepts and make them really simple. And there's a few that you've set out that I'm going to throw at you. And I
Okay.
want to just dive into a little bit more of some things that you've put out on social media and your messages. Hopefully, we'll get through all of them, but if not, we'll have to do a part two.
That's
So,
fine.
first one is what's what if self-love isn't something we need to learn, but something we need to unlearn?
Yes.
I really like this concept because I think it seems like we're always looking to add more things into our mind, into our practice, into our life in order to make us complete. When in reality, if we don't look at the things that don't serve us anymore, eventually you get to a very short ceiling. And then this is where I think that so often people fall into this yo-yo cycle of success and failure where they do well for a period of time and then they fall back
Hmm.
into old habits. And it's this cycle over and over again that's going in.
Yeah. So I think that looking at eliminating things is just as important as adding them, right? And a lot of times meeting ourselves where we are actually means what can I take off my plate instead of just adding things to my to-do list to check the box on, right? So a lot of times when we think about a self-love practice, we think about adding the things that everyone wants to see, right? Okay, well, I need to do more self-care, meaning I need to take more bubble baths and do luxurious things for myself and get massages, or I need to do, meditation or slow walks or sauna or red light therapy, all these list of endless things that you can incorporate into your day. But are you looking at the ways in which you incorporate shame on yourself throughout the day? Are you looking at ways that you're not celebrating your wins currently, right? Like, what are the current things that you are doing right now where you're shitting on yourself that you could take off the table or even just create some awareness around,
Mhm.
right? To start to backpedal them a little bit and be like, oh, like I'm realizing that I'm doing that. If we stop doing those things, imagine how much better you could feel.
Mhm.
And then you could probably have the capacity to add some of those really nice things to your plate, right? But when we're just trying to add all the time, it feels super overwhelming. And then in the background, we're still shitting on ourselves with that inner critic on our back.
Mhm.
So we're almost not getting the progress that we think we are because I'm doing this thing and I'm checking the box and I'm really, really trying. Trying doesn't mean shit,
Right.
right? You're either doing or you're not doing. And what can we not do in order to be able to get to a place where we can take more action?
Have you seen this at all, a more challenge for women? Because you work with a lot of women who are naturally more nurturing, more caregiving. Like, what can I give more and more to kind of add more stuff and think that they're superwoman, that they can just keep putting all this play. Men, I think it's similar but different in many ways. But have you seen with the women that you work with, is this a more challenging thing to do to look at what are the things we need to remove rather than just adding more shit on top of the pile?
100%, because I think women operate on a never-ending hamster wheel to-do list that's always going in the back of their mind. Not to say that men don't have a list of to-dos, but I do think a key difference is that men have a have an easier time to self-validate based on how they're acting in their purpose, right? Versus women seek more external validation for the acts of service that they are doing outwardly for others. And this also is conditioned over time,
Hmm.
right? If I'm taught that my value is emphasized when I do things for other people, when I show up and cook meals for other people, when I have things set up a certain way, when I, have the kids' schedules lined up and like it feels good, right? It's a really big sense of achievement. But if that's where I'm taught that over time that I can get more validation for the things that I'm doing all the time rather than just inherently being,
Hmm.
then it becomes really, really hard to find internal validation when I'm not doing all of those things all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough cycle. Yeah. It's so easy to look to the external metrics of these are the things that make me successful. So, well, to get more success, I must look more,
I need to do
external.
more things, right? And then we burn out.
Yeah.
And then you feel even worse about yourself because you're never meeting this expectation that you're putting on yourself. And then simultaneously realizing that you are the one that's controlling the pressure dial and you're the
Yeah.
only one that can turn it down. Because most often when I'm dealing with my clients and I'm asking them, whose expectations are these? Who says that you have to do all of these things? And it's like they never realized before that no one else is putting these expectations on them but themselves.
Hmm.
And they're like, oh, well, I guess it's just me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that means that you get to take some shit off the plate.
Exactly. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Um, so one I love, when you're going through a tough time, ask yourself, what do I want this story to look like in hindsight?
Yeah.
So this practice of kind of future casting into how you want things to see, I thought was so powerful. There was a story I remember of, during the height of when we were in lockdown, and this one guy I was talking to, and he's like, I just can't seem motivated when you get to work. And he just kept saying, I can't wait till you open up again. I can't wait till you open up again, to the studio. And I kind of just in the moment, I was like, one day our doors are going to open again and we're going to be back in and you're going to come through and you'll be faced with one of two feelings. Either one, you're going to feel really pumped that you still did something throughout this time that you stayed true to yourself and you feel really good in that first class. Or two, you're going to feel so down that you let yourself go during this time and you waited for this all that. But either way, you're going to come to that day is going to come. What
Yeah.
story do you want to have?
Yes. Yeah. It's like time is going to keep passing no matter what.
Mhm.
And the only thing that makes a difference is what you decide to do with it. And so this idea of self-reflection in a futuristic way, right? One of the practices that I have a lot of my clients do is like a journaling practice. It's a way of almost cultivating gratitude, but in a future casting kind of way, right? So it's like, I'm so grateful now that fill in the blank,
Mm,
right? So it's like manifesting what you would want to see, something that you want out of your life, and expressing gratitude for that thing as if it has already happened, right? So I'm writing my story in a way that I want to see it. And then how can I backtrack and look at what are the actions that's actually going to get me towards the ending that I've already written for myself?
mhm.
And that's a really good way of keeping myself on task. And when life happens, because it's going to, because it always does, shit's going to pop up and it's going to get us off course. That's okay. I can still look at, okay, what is the thing that I'm going to be most grateful for that I'm looking towards? And how can I adapt to still get towards that? What is the action that I can take today? And if I were
Mhm.
to look at this in hindsight, did I do that thing? Am I showing up for myself in that way?
Right. I wonder if there's something too, just biochemically about the energy and dopamine of anticipation with this as well.
There
Because
is.
like,
I think like studies have shown that even just like writing down a goal,
yeah,
right, and saying you're going to do something gives you a similar dopamine hit as actually doing the thing.
yeah. Well, and there's something I remember there was this study that they did with like young kids who were in college who were going out for like a night on the town and they like strapped all this stuff to them and like checked when, certain chemicals were coming out. And they did this in a pretty multivariate study and they found where they had the most like fun chemicals going through, like the dopamine cycle,
Mhm.
was the pregame. It was like it was before the
Uh,
night got started. And if you think as in competition, like what's the most exciting part? It's ramping up, it's getting ready for
yeah.
this. So writing and like a journaling practice that I love of like as it already happened, you almost go into it with excitement of what you're about to do rather than wondering, when is this going to happen? Am I going to be able to do this? Like, no, if you already have forecasted it, that it's already done, now you just get to look forward to doing it throughout the day. I wonder if it's a biohack that works in there as well.
Well, I think it's twofold because the same feeling that you get the excitement of anticipation, I think a lot of people also associate that with fear, right? And that's what will keep them from taking action. The anticipation of something, especially doing something that feels unsafe or unfamiliar to us, is what actually keeps us from taking the action to begin with most of the time.
Mhm.
And so if I can start to familiarize, so like a lot of Olympic athletes will do this, right? Where they will do a lot of visualizing around actually doing the thing that they need to do when it's time to perform so that it doesn't feel unsafe or foreign to them in the time of competition.
Mhm.
So if I can get my nervous system on board with the fact that this thing that I've never done has already happened, and I'm imagining that I am the person who I'm going to be when it does happen, and rep that out, then whether it's already happened or not, I'm already priming my system to be available and open to the fact that when it does happen, it's not going to feel unsafe or foreign, and I'm not going to self-sabotage when it comes my way.
Mm.
And I think that's really like a good way to get closer to the things that you want to do without allowing fear to make you backpedal and be like, oh no, I'm not ready. Right.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. I think there was the study, I think, from the Zen and the Art of Archery, where the guy talked about actually practicing without a bow and arrow, but just the
Hmm.
concept of it, of in practice, actually helped in accuracy.
Yes. Yeah, like the actual motion
Mhm.
itself and even just visualizing it, right? Like visualizing hitting the target every
Yeah.
time, again and again and again. It's amazing what your brain can do then when it comes time to actually do the thing.
Yeah. All right. So taking action is the only way to disprove our own self-limiting beliefs. Turn action into evidence.
Yeah, I think so often we get overwhelmed with thinking about the things that need to be done. And change is not comfortable. And nobody really likes it. There's a select few people that love it, that love chaos and change, and props to them. I'm not one of them, right? I'm a creature of habit. Most people like routine. They like things that are familiar, they like things that feel safe. And identifying small action steps, in my opinion, and the opinion of other people that I've studied with, is the only way to actually overcome that overwhelming feeling.
Mhm.
And then by doing that, then you slowly start to collect the proof that disproves that inner critic to say, sit down, this is actually happening, and I'm showing you that it's possible. And now I'm collecting all this evidence in my favor towards the outcome that I want
Mhm.
versus all of the evidence that I have through my lived experience and what other people have told me that says it can't happen or it's too risky or it's going to be hard, right? I have to start to collect the evidence in the other bucket that is for what I want. And the only way to do that is to take small actions towards that thing
Yeah.
and then prove to yourself, show yourself, hey, this is happening and it's okay. This is happening and you're still safe.
I think why I really love this is because of what I think the misconceptions about a strong mindset are in popular culture, where often we think that it's this sit down and just meditate or just visualize and
Mm,
build this strong mindset on there. But that can also be a beautiful procrastination tool to actually taking any action. And it's
yes.
like, I think Chris Williamson said this is like trying to think your way out of an overthinking problem is trying to sniff your way out of a cocaine addiction.
Yeah.
And it's like the same thing of like by just taking action. This is why I think like if you build your physical strength, it will go downstream into your mental strength, having a physical practice of something, because if you change your body, you get stronger physically. It's naturally going to, by osmosis, build yourself into a stronger mindset. Maybe not exactly, they need to work together, but if you just think that there's going to be this perfect day that you're going to be ready to take action on here, it's like, no, take action and then build the evidence up. So if you do have those natural moments where the inner critic starts to take over, you can look back and be like, oh no, I did this. Like these are the
Yeah.
victories that I had. I'm a badass.
Yeah, it's like when people talk about the difference between motivation and, momentum, right? Of like, oh, well, I just need to wait till I'm motivated. And it's like, no, if you wait till you're motivated, what are you waiting for? And
Mhm.
nothing's just gonna pop up and be like, you know what, today I'm gonna do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like just start doing the thing, whatever version of it you are capable of doing right now, and then that will start to build momentum. And I love the analogy that you made because that was another big segue that kind of led me into wanting to coach and getting so much more impact out of the mindset piece. Because what I was realizing is the impact that I was having in the gym with these women, where I was able to show them what it could feel like to be strong, right, was opening up realms of possibilities in all areas of their life. So it has this beautiful ripple effect of like, oh my gosh, it was never even within my realm of possibilities to be able to lift a barbell with that much weight on it. And now that I can, the feeling that that elicits in me is contagious. And now I can look for other areas in my life where things that I didn't even think were possible
Mhm.
could become possible now. Because again, I'm collecting that evidence to show me that the things that I never thought would be, that I would be able to do, I can do. Jumping on a 20-inch box, right? Like there's, what is the stat? Like what, after 30, I think for every year that you stop sprinting and jumping, it's like you'll never do it again.
Right.
That's wild,
It's
right? So
crazy.
every client that I work with, we are jumping because the goal is
Right.
to never stop jumping. And then once you get there, that's one of my favorite things to see, right? Is to witness is when you see someone do something, accomplish something that in their mind they never ever thought was possible. And they do it, and that feeling that washes over them, and you can visually see it in their face. It's so powerful. And then to be able to say, what other areas of your life are there things that you never thought were possible that we can take one action step on today? Because that 20-inch box started as that 2-inch riser,
Right.
right?
I love that you brought that up, Laken. Zach Henderson, who was recently on the podcast, who I know we were talking about this in the process of goal setting. And he said about, at the beginning, thinking that somebody who's just getting started or trying to do something new needs to spend all this time of envisioning everything that they're possibly capable of and having this huge, big, grand, idea of what they're going to create in their life. Well, when you're in a position where you don't think that you can jump up onto a 2-inch riser, let alone a 20-inch, box, it's like you don't know what you're capable of in that time. You're not in the right state of doing it. So building momentum, and then all of a sudden you see that you unlock this belief from generating evidence of what you just did. Now all of a sudden the wheels start to turn more a bit. Oh shit, what else can I do? Like maybe I've been
Yes.
putting myself on this back burner of this, but no, now I just did this awesome thing. Maybe I could do this. So it's like, I think again, it's this, mindset is not something that is just like a one time, like 1 hour thing that you just do and practice. It's a building momentum and adding on top of it over and over again because you don't know what you're going to do or what evidence you're going to build up in the next, day or month or couple months that could propel you to the next step afterwards. That's why we see these hockey sticks of stuff that go on. People work, 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 and then all of a sudden it's just this trajectory that just flies up.
Yeah, and you're always only one choice away from getting closer to your goal, right? Like it's really all about choices. And I like looking at all these options as progressions, right? Similar to hypertrophy or strength training. And what you said about, just sitting and meditating, right? This is like what people used to think mindset was, and what a lot of people probably still do think of it. In the early days, I did try to prescribe things like that to my clients, right? Where I'd be like, okay, well, I need you to do 20 minutes of guided meditation a day, or I need you to do, 5 minutes of breath work a day, and like get comfortable with sitting with your thoughts. But a lot of people just aren't there yet.
Mhm.
And so that seems really overwhelming and completely unattainable, like that 20-inch box, right? And also, it's probably not getting me anywhere because at that point in my life, I can guarantee I'm probably just doing it to check a box and I'm not actually feeling into what it's doing for me. So, again, unlocking those small pieces of possibility over time. And then when you can see how it's practically applied to your life and then celebrate a win associated with
Mhm.
doing it, then it's like, that's that evidence, right? That's where it's like, oh, like it does work. And then I could do more of it. And then it could be even better.
Mhm. I love that. All right, this one threw me for a loop. So, having self-compassion does not give you a hall pass to repeat behavior that's not serving you.
Oh, yeah. People don't like that.
This notion of self-compassion, I have this like Jekyll and Hyde idea for. What do you think about self-compassion and the benefits of it, but also what are some of the roadblocks that can pop up with this idea, maybe if it's misconstrued?
Yeah, I find that most people do struggle with self-compassion. Most people will start out with a lot of shame and self-judgment. And in a search for self-compassion, we tend to go about it the wrong way. And what tends to happen a lot of times, at least in my experience with the clients that I've worked with, is now that I'm trying to access self-compassion, I'm not going to shame myself, but now I'm going to search for the convenient option. And because I'm going to show myself grace in what I'm feeling right now, that means that I'm going to lean into habits that do not necessarily serve me. So this could look like, oh, I really am shitting on myself for my lack of performance at work right now. And I've been really struggling and I've been really stressed, and my kids are, having a hard time or giving me a hard time. And life just feels really hard. I'm in a difficult season. And before, I would just say, I have to push through or work harder, or I'm not doing XYZ enough. Right. And so, in an effort to cultivate more self compassion, I'm going to say, okay, I can honor that I'm feeling this way right now. And I'm going to give myself a hall pass to drink a bottle of wine every weekend and eat a bunch of baked goods and just couch it up. Right.
Yeah.
Like Netflix and chill.
Yeah.
And I think that this tends to happen because we like big polarizations,
Hmm.
right? We like the idea of, okay, well, it's either all or nothing. And it becomes this really slippery slope. And it's not that the things that we are seeking self-compassion around. And I think that women especially tend to seek self-compassion around things that are convenient, unfortunately, because of the never-ending to-do list and the feeling of overwhelm. So it's like, well, I need to find this convenient option to give me this dopamine hit that I'm looking for,
Hmm.
instead of being really, really honest with yourself and saying, is this choice actually making me feel better? Not feel better on a superficial level, not making me feel better just in this moment. But again, in hindsight, if I'm looking back at this story, would I be proud of it? Would it get me closer to the things that I want? If I valued my happiness above all else, would this action serve that purpose?
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging things of all of us, in just going through growth of life, is being okay with who you are in the process of becoming who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Ed Milet said this, which I loved, is try to live a life that's blissfully dissatisfied. And I think that's just a beautiful line, but it's where, this concept that I've had this back and forth with, because I'm just a psycho with words and the sentences we use for ourselves. But when someone's like, you're perfect just the way you are, like you're fine. And we say these things to each other like, you're beautiful, you're awesome, you're amazing, and stuff like that. And it's like, then it's so easy then to do something like throw out a post on social media and get some attention on it or so. And
Mm-hmm.
it validates this almost pseudo self-compassion that no, you're fine, you can give yourself grace. But at the same time, no, you still want to push to become the next version of yourself. You're okay
Yes.
with, yes, you're perfect where you are in this moment, but next year, if you're that same person now, you're not. You keep, the process of evolving at the same time. But I think it is such a dance that that we're all trying to strive for, is being okay, because on the other side of it, the type A person, which I, raise my hand on, is
Same.
always looking at who I'm going to be and like the next step and not giving myself enough grace on it. But at the inverse of that, there's a lot of people who are in this mode that need that push where, yeah, self-compassion is maybe not what you need anymore. You still need to do the things that you need to do.
Well, I also think it's a matter of discernment, right? Like, can you discern between compassion and complacency? Because there is a difference, right? There's a difference in being okay with who I am and where I am today and still wanting more for myself versus, well, I'm going to substantiate all my choices and my bad behavior right now because it's okay where I am.
Mhm.
And we're leaving out the piece of, okay, but are you happy and is that where you want to be?
Right.
Right.
So in your career now of working with so many women and the work that you're doing, what's been the biggest evolution in your process of coaching? Like from when you started versus now, what are things that maybe you used to think were really important that you realize aren't as much anymore, or vice versa? Like what are things that you didn't realize were so vital that you really focus on a lot more in helping the people that you work with?
It's a really good question. I will say that in the beginning of my journey of digging in deeper with clients with mindset, I made it more complicated than it needed to be. So I wanted to see all of the things evolving, right? Um, I wanted to push for what I would call like lifestyle optimization. And I wasn't as attuned to being able to celebrate the small wins along the way because that's something that I personally struggle with for myself, right? Like I suffer from the type A situation as well. And so this takes because I think with anything, and especially having your own business is a huge personal development tool. And so like as we grow and develop as humans, only then can we start to carve out some awareness around the areas that we're not serving our people.
Mhm.
Right. And so what I started to take note of was, oh, like you're not really good at celebrating your own wins. Like you achieve something and then it's like, yeah, of course I did. I was supposed to do that. On to the next, right? Like I wasn't taking time to substantiate that evidence to be able to show myself how big the possibilities could get. And so in understanding that about myself, I wasn't doing that for my clients either.
Mhm.
And they sure as hell weren't doing it for themselves, right? Like they weren't like, you know what, we didn't celebrate that win on that coaching call.
Right, exactly.
So the importance of that has really, really stood out to me because that's where the fun stuff is, right? I focused so long for a long time on the trauma piece of it. And how can we repurpose the trauma? How can we grow from this? How can we get unstuck? Right. And that is a very, very important piece. But just like talk therapy, you can only stay there for so long
Right.
without feeling like you're in this loop of not being able to take new action or seek new opportunity. And so when I started to shift to more of a place of, okay, can we get to a place where we're more future casting, where we're looking for the little opportunities, the wins, the things that we're finding the evidence in your day to day, right? Things that are actually happening in your real life, and we're calling them to your attention so that your brain can register them. And then we're putting that in the bank, right? We're getting those reps in and making it small enough so they can digest it. It just became so much more fun. It became
Mhm.
so much more fun for me and them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's it's like the difference between what's optimal versus what's practical with people.
Mm,
And I think it's we're always looking for what is the best way to do something where it's like oh, you need this, you need this, oh, we're going to implement this. And it's like we want to get all this stuff, in, but if it's not practical from there, then it doesn't matter how optimal it is or how good it is. It's just going to fall on deaf ears or fall in a bad system versus by just starting with, yeah, maybe just start with one thing. What's the most practical thing that you can do and build that over time? Because if you do that, then the practical becomes the optimal because you're actually doing it.
exactly. And it's sustainable, right? Like when
Yeah.
we start off out the gate and it's too many things all at once, there's no way that's sustainable over time. And
Mhm.
that's when you don't create that stickiness, right? So I was so concerned with like being results driven. Like, oh, where are we seeing this manifest in your life? Like, okay, what results are we actually getting? Right. And like it has to be tangible. And
Mhm.
not that the results can't be tangible, but it's not always that black and white, that cut and dry. And
Yeah.
when we can look for like the glimmers of, oh, where can we see where this is going? And then can we start to take a look at the progression in retrospect, right? So like I love getting a client to a point where it's like they're just like I keep making fitness analogies, but it is the same, right? Like when we look at progress photos, so many clients get to the point where they've actually made really, really great progress, but they can't see it because they see themselves in the mirror every day,
Hmm.
right? You can't see the forest through the trees. And so when you go back and you say, hey, actually, look at this progress photo that we took a year ago,
Right.
right? Versus today, could you imagine what that person felt like versus how you feel today? We can do the same thing with mindset, where
Hmm.
and again, doing this through writing, right? Like I do a lot of work with Google Docs.
Hmm.
And so it's like, can we revisit some of that shit that we wrote down when we started working
Right.
together and where your head was at then? And look how far we've gotten. Look at the things that you're anticipating now. Look at the things that you're dreaming for yourself. Look at the things that you want now that wasn't even an option then.
Right. Yeah, it's trying to, because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about are things that are hard to measure.
Yeah.
Like fitness is easy, right? Like you want to lose 20 pounds. Okay, you can see that one way or the other.
Yes.
With building a strong mindset, it's very much ethereal and it's a lot of these things are very immeasurable. So making it some sort of metrics, that's why, yeah, daily wins every night of just focus on, because then you can go back and you can review it. And then all of a sudden, you don't even realize it, but now all of a sudden you've shifted your mind. You've processed it differently. It's like falling in love, right? You can't be like, by this day, I'm going to fall in love with this person, right? No, you just
Right.
do this stuff every day. And then eventually you're like, holy shit, I'm in love.
Right.
It's very
Yeah.
similar.
And that's it's a really good point because a lot of people really struggle. I think a lot of mindset coaches really struggle with the idea of like, how do I deliver tangible results? Like people don't know that they even
Right.
need this stuff, right? Let alone that it's like this valuable. And I think it's a matter of like giving people what they like, selling people what they want, but giving them what they need,
Hmm.
you know? And so a lot of times when I meet with my clients in their first call, we talk about, okay, what is the biggest area of struggle in your life right now? And what would you like it to look like?
Hmm.
And then that gives me a good opportunity to build a roadmap. So that way, when we do get to 6 months down the road or however long we decide to take our journey together, then I can be like, hey, remember when this was the biggest worry that you had? Like, look at where we are now, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's
really,
good.
really cool. But you have to be able to ask the right questions and tease those things out and put it in writing or somewhere for these clients to be able to see it. So that way it can be clear for them because so much of this stuff is in our heads all the time. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's the
And
struggle is we lack the clarity.
100. Yeah. Laken Summerville. Laken, thank you so much. I'm really grateful for you taking the time. I really love how your mind works in regards to coaching and the work that you're doing. So really appreciate you taking the time today and jumping on.
Thank you so much. I had a blast. This is awesome.
Yeah, it was great. If people want to check out more of the work that you're doing, follow you, what's the best place that they can go to?
Yeah, Instagram is the best. You can follow me at Coach Laken
Mhm.
and also the Rejuvenating Health podcast. We do a weekly one there.
Oh, beautiful. Awesome. Laken
Yeah.
Summerville. I said badass name. Keep that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Laken, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you so much. Go follow Laken, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one. All right, peace.
Yeah.